I want to bring in MSNBC's Vaughn Hilliard, who's covering the White House. Eugene Robinson is a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and MSNBC political analyst. Tyler Pager is the New York Times White House correspondent and co-author of 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and Democrats Lost America. Tara Setmayer is former GOP communications director, as well as co-founder and CEO of the Seneca Project. Eugene, there has been a consistent message from survivors and many of their supporters about the efforts to release these files. This is about justice. This is about standing up against heinous acts. This is not about politics. Is that why the administration's political messaging isn't working?
You know, the administration is usually a lot better on political messaging than it is on the Epstein case. And one big reason is Donald Trump, President Trump. The Wall Street Journal is absolutely right. He keeps acting as if he has some horrible thing to hide, even though I've not seen any evidence, certainly not any hard evidence, that says he's guilty of anything in terms of Epstein and the young girls. Yet he acts as if he is. And this extraordinary effort, for example, just in the last couple of days to somehow get Republicans to take their name off the discharge position in the House, petition in the House. It just adds to the series of actions that make him look guilty, even if he isn't.
So, Tara, let me play a little bit more of what Sky Roberts said in response to the administration's claims that this is all a hoax.
And I want to be very clear. If my sister was here today, she would be appalled by this administration. She would not refer to President Trump as a gentleman. He's not acknowledging survivors. Not once has he even acknowledged my sister in the sense of who she was as a hero. I just think it's time to put a little respect on her name and all survivors' names and treat them as heroes. And stop, and just stop the nonsense, this political BS that just keeps coming out of his mouth and the administration's mouth. It needs to stop.
I mean, Tara, a little empathy can go a very long way for the survivors, for their families who have been just waiting for justice. How do you see the way the White House and this president are handling this?
Well, it's a disaster for them, and it has been from day one. I mean, this is something, the Epstein saga has plagued Donald Trump for years, which is why he's bending over backwards to try to bury the truth from coming out. This is not the type of behavior of someone who's completely innocent in the situation. If everything was above board, then the files would have been released on day one like he promised. Or like his attorney general claimed that there were files sitting on her desk months ago when she was on Fox News, and those files all of a sudden disappeared. And what about, why would you have 1,000 FBI agents wasting their time going through the files if there was to look for Donald Trump's name, if there was nothing to be concerned about? I mean, the pattern here is incredulous. I mean, the people are looking at this and saying, this is not how you behave if you have nothing to hide. And the absolute lack of empathy, the lack of compassion, the lack of concern for the survivors of this despicable human being, I think also speaks volumes. And that's why you see this reaction, this visceral reaction from so many people across party lines. Very few things have unified this country. But I think that what you're seeing happen right now, there is a certain amount of empathy. When you have Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC on the same side of an issue, that speaks volumes. And the dam could potentially be breaking here with MAGA. And because these Republicans are looking at the way Donald Trump is handling this and saying, release the files already, or we're not going to align with you if you're continuing to obfuscate over a sex trafficker pedophile. And then also you juxtapose that with the preferential treatment of Ghislaine Maxwell, which is something else that's a complete outrage. And what a disrespect and spit in the face to the survivors of this woman and what she did with Jeffrey Epstein. And I think collectively, the American people are looking at the situation and saying this is the acts of an unhinged president who has something to hide. And the dam is starting to break, and it should. There needs to be accountability. Enough is enough.
And Vaughn, I think it's worth noting that the president, who I think it's an understatement to say he typically does not shy away from a camera, has refused at least twice to answer questions about Jeffrey Epstein or the emails. But he is posting about it. So what's he saying?
Right, and this is where it gets difficult to understand the extent to which there is any guilt of conscience on the behalf of the president of the United States, because he hasn't shared regret. He's noted that he, in his words, booted Jeffrey Epstein from his Mar-a-Lago club because he was a creep and that he stole young women that were working at his club. But that is a far cry from suggesting that he was aware of sexual abuse and that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were engaged in sex trafficking. And that is where there is the deep questions as to why not only has he not ordered the release of the DOJ files, which he suggested during his presidential campaign he would, but here, just in the last hour, in 2 different social media posts, he is now directly calling for his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to investigate Jeffrey Epstein as it pertains to some certain individuals that are Democrats. The former president, Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman. He directly calls on his Attorney General to investigate these individuals and their involvement in Jeffrey Epstein and their relationship with him. And this is really what hits at the heart of the question as to the defense that he and the Department of Justice have made so far as to why they haven't released the files up to this point. And that is to protect individuals who the Department of Justice was not able to convincingly go to a grand jury to seek an indictment of for criminal wrongdoing. But now what you have is the president calling for a direct investigation and the potential release of files as it relates to Democrats, but not himself. I want to let you listen to attempted questions that were directed at the president on Tuesday night.
Mr. President, on Jeffrey Epstein.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for going.
Mr. President, can you respond to these Epstein emails that were released today?
Well done, Mr. President.
Great job.
Ignoring the questions, which has not been common practice for him in 2025, Chris. And then last night again, the president, upon leaving the East Room, several reporters again tried to ask him about the documents that were released by the House Oversight Committee, and he walked out without acknowledging those questions as well. And that is where, instead of placing the ire on Jeffrey Epstein or even specifically the victims and the survivors, and understanding that they have actively speaking out and sharing their own experiences, you have the president here in the last hour in another social media post explicitly calling out Republicans on Capitol Hill, either in the House, who signed on to that discharge petition, or also potentially Republican senators who may vote to have those the DOJ compelled to release the files. He said that some quote, weak Republicans have fallen into their clutches because they are soft and foolish. That is so far here on this Friday where the president is directing his ire through all of this.
So, Tyler, there's a real possibility here that despite the administration's pressure campaign, dozens of Republicans could vote with the Democrats to release the files. Politico said it could be as many as 100, potentially, in any case, a veto-proof majority. What would that mean for the White House and maybe as significantly, the pressure it might bring to the Senate vote?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big question is what happens should this discharge petition pass the House? What sort of pressure does John Thune, the majority leader in the Senate, face from his base and from the broader Republican Party about bringing this to the floor? I think it's unlikely at this point that we see the Senate vote on this petition, but I think the House vote will be instructive. But, I think this broader environment that we're in right now, where Trump is facing some pushback and pressure from his base and from some of his most loyal supporters on a whole range of issues. Obviously, the Epstein case has been a flashpoint dividing the base, but it's not just the Epstein files, right? It's also inflation and prices, his overseas commitments. There's a whole range of things. And so I think this is just part of a larger challenge the president and his administration is facing.